And I love the way that this professor described it to us. He's like, just think about it as it's a great college intern next to you that, is really smart, has learned a lot, but they still need a lot of direction and guidance. So it's not about taking your job. I think it's actually about making a better version of you or making a better version of me. That's how I'm framing it in my mind.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sam Thomas. L&D and HR has been a part of my world for about 15 years now, and I've had the chance to work with some really great companies along the way. And I primarily focus on learning and performance strategy. So I'm genuinely a nerd when it comes to watching people grow inside of organizations. So getting to dig into this conversation today is really exciting. And I would like to welcome my co-host, Omer, and Gena. Thank you so much for joining us today. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you. Hi, Sam. Hi, Omer. It's nice to be with you here today. I'm Gena Smith. I am the CHRO for J.Crew. I joined 6 months ago in this new role.
Thank you so much. Well, I say we just jump into some questions, Gena, if you feel comfortable with that. All right. So just a little moment of background and grounding setting. You spent 15 years of your career at LVMH. I'll let you say the name properly just a moment, where you described the infrastructure there as cutting edge. And then, most recently, about 4 months ago, you walked in as the CHRO at J.Crew. So what did that transition actually feel like? What does a blank canvas opportunity look like when you're in the midst of it?
Well, it was actually 14 years that I was at LVMH. And, it was an incredible journey, incredible trajectory. Most of the time that I was there, the company was going through a very rapid growth and expansion. So it was just every day was exciting and different and unique. And my role continued to evolve and grow. But at a certain point, I was really wanting to take on additional responsibility. And it was, LVMH, Louis Vuitton, Moet Hennessy is a French group. And essentially all roads sort of lead to Paris. So I started thinking about what would I want to do? What would be sort of the next type of role? And one thing I really loved about LVMH is just the brands, the heritage, the story, the history, being a part of something that was so special. And so when I was approached about the JCrew opportunity, it really was one of the ones that really spoke to me because it's absolutely an iconic American brand. It's beloved by not only Americans, it's actually beloved globally, even though we haven't necessarily had business around the world. There have been different iterations of that, but it's a very well-known, highly respected and loved brand. And so, it was sort of this opportunity to come in, leverage a lot of what I had learned and done in my previous role for an American brand and be a part of continuing to support this brand. It was a very exciting opportunity to be a part of this story at this moment in time for the brand and for the group, I would say, because we really have 3 brands in our portfolio.
What are those 3 brands? I'm familiar, obviously, with J.Crew, but I'm not familiar with the other brands.
Sure. Well, the group is comprised of, I would say maybe 2.5 brands. So we have JCrew, we have the JCrew Factory, which is more of a value brand, but it's run completely separate and independently. It has its own leadership team, its own product team, its own merchandising team, marketing team. And then we have Madewell, which is another brand that was created. It was an older brand, but it was sort of reimagined and built by Libby Wadle, who's our current CEO of the JCrew Group.
Oh, wow. Well, to jump back to what you were saying, so making that transition after 14 years, what surprised you most in the first 30 days?
There were so many things. I mean, some of it I kind of anticipated. Again, the employee love, the passion that our employees have, and this desire to stick with JCrew no matter what, no matter the ups and the downs. And by the way, that's not that easy to cultivate that. It's really hard to cultivate that if you don't have it. So I was really pleasantly surprised to see that absolutely exists. But in a strange way, I found more similarities to LVMH, which is a French family company, that I would have expected. And probably because we have a lot of similar values around creativity and innovation, this entrepreneurial spirit. So I think really it's the shared values that really resonate with both of those groups, which is also probably what drew me to JCrew. Another sort of subconscious draw that I had to the company. So that was really exciting. I think I also saw that there's some amazing infrastructure in place, but still a lot of opportunity to continue to do more and to help the organization, especially in the HR function, to be more advanced in certain areas, to be more clear. And that was exciting to be a part of it. But maybe there was sort of more opportunity than I had realized from the outside.
I have a question for you. How different is it working for a company that basically sells an experience, right? Like you're all about experience, you're about the brand, you're about like, people feel something when they think about your brands. How does it make things internally different in HR? For example, I was in a lecture of the CLO of the Four Seasons, and she talked about kind of like Four Seasons is all about kind of like, guest experience and like how to make it basically the best. So everything inside is basically changing and based on that. So how was it for you? Like, what did you observe or like what you're focused on in order to maintain and enhance this experience?
Well, I think that what I've always strongly believed, and I think Four Seasons does it very well, is if you want to offer an incredible experience to your customer, which you're right, our brands, my previous brands, my current brand, I mean, JCrew Group does, you have to start by delivering an incredible experience to your employees. You can never ask your employees to offer something that they themselves are not experiencing as an organization. So there needs to be a real coherency between the values that you espouse and the way that those come to life internally and externally. And so that is really, for me, the unlock. Is the ability for us as HR leaders, as business leaders, to really bring the values to life for our team, to help them understand what that looks like, what's expected of them, and to cultivate that within the organization. Because then, in my experience, it happens more organically externally. The customer has a very authentic experience because the employees are happy, they're engaged, they love what they're doing, they love the brand, they feel a part of it, they understand the mission. And the consequence is great experience and frankly, great business results.
I really love that. And you can truly tell the culture of a company by how their leaders are living those values. So it sounds like JCrew is really living the values that they're preaching to the rest of the company, which made, I guess, the transition a little easier for you. In that transition, I know that you are doing a lot of renovation to really enhance the EVP for JCrew, and that's kind of why they brought you into the space. Can you talk about what that looks like, building that from scratch with JCrew?
The employee value proposition. So I would go back a little bit and say that JCrew, we have the values. We have our 5 values. I think there was an opportunity and there is an opportunity for us to make sure that they're really embedded in the group. And not only are the values embedded, but actually the behaviors that are associated. So for example, one of our core values is creativity. But we actually need to define what that means. What are we talking about in creativity? So we're actually doing that right now. We're going through a whole process to define. We have a partner that we're working with. It's been really exciting week because we've had lots of focus groups. I mean, this is really a bottoms-up exercise. We're doing it with our employees to say, what does creativity mean to you? What does collaboration mean to you? How does it come to life? How do you want it to come to life? So I would say the EVP actually starts, everything for me actually starts with the framework of the values. So aligning on the values, and we're pressure testing them as well through this process to make sure that are these really the right values for the group? Because I think that's important to do. How were they determined to begin with? So you align on the values, you really understand and communicate what the behaviors are. And then we have to filter that in everything we do, how we recruit talent, how we assess talent, our leadership development programs. That's the common thread that binds us. And that becomes the basis for our EVP. JCrew, like many brands, I think, focuses so much on the customer brand, but it's not that different again, because the values need to be coherent and consistent, as we said. So we're right now refining how do we want to show up to the current employee and to the prospective employee. But for me, it really starts with all the work that we're doing on values to concretize them, for lack of a better word. and embed them fully in the culture so that they're just understood, embraced, that you could ask, it works when you could ask any employee anywhere, like, hey, what are the values? And they just know. And I had the opportunity to be a part of delivering that in my last company. But I can tell you, I mean, we were like year after year after year, we were repeating the work, repeating the values, repeating the messages, so it really is a matter of being clear and then being consistent and frankly repetitive in order to ensure it becomes embedded in the organization.
One more thing I'm hearing here is not only it's being clear, but also it's very important with values to understand if someone embodies the value or not. Like, what does it mean when you're not? Because there are things, a lot of times you see corporate values that are very vague and kind of like, be great, or what does it mean for me? Like in my day to day, there has to be a behavior that's it's very, very clear if I'm doing it or I'm not doing it. Because if it's kind of like very hard to judge and the value is not sharp, so people do not understand what's expected. Can you give some examples of behaviors? How there, for example, you took creativity or collaboration. Like, do you have kind of like your specific definition of like what does it mean to be creative? Also, creativity can be kind of like vague.
Yeah, and I think that's the challenge. And by the way, to your point, it's also clear that once you define that, you actually hold people accountable. And that's where embedding it in the performance management process is really important. So, creativity, I mean, again, there's so many ways that you can define it, and it can mean different things in different functions, but it can really mean that you are a leader that allows your teams to express their point of view. You make space for that, you encourage that, and then you create a safe environment where different ideas, thoughts can come about. And then we would say, okay, like if we're going to use that as one of the behaviors, we would ask you concretely, either during the interview process or during the performance management, give us an example. When have you done that? How were you able to do that? Collaboration is another key. I think a lot of organizations, and we have some areas where there's a siloed way of working. So not just as a leader, but as an employee, we're expecting you, we want to see that you're working with each of your leaders. And by the way, if you can start working collaboratively earlier in your career, that is going to set you up for so much greater success as you advance in your career to leadership, right? If you can already start thinking, I'm in sales, okay, what would marketing think about that? How does that impact finance? How does that impact retail? So we want to start cultivating that thinking already at very like junior and senior levels, but asking people like, also tell us how you did it. Like, give me very concrete examples. And it doesn't have to be overcomplicated. I mean, again, we're defining now our behaviors, and creativity is maybe collaboration can be easier to actually qualify what that looks like. But creativity is important also because when you don't put some context around the value, then you leave it open to people's interpretation. And they could say, I'm being collaborative, I'm being creative because I came into the organization, I came into that meeting and I had lots of great creative ideas. That's not necessarily what we mean, because we also mean your ability to cultivate creativity within other members of your team. That's how we really start to embed creativity in the organization. It's not just coming from you as a leader. Do you create that environment where people feel safe to share? Candor is another one of our values. How are you creating that sort of psychologically safe environment where people can have honest, transparent, and brutally candid conversations when things are good and when they're bad? So that's sort of how we're thinking about it. But again, yes, holding people accountable is key. I don't think you can actually say you're a values-driven organization if you're not really holding people accountable when they don't deliver the values or when they don't operate against the values, in my experience, at least.
I love that your values, first of all, that you're defining them, making it easy for there to be a conversation happening in using that language and that nomenclature. It seems like it's pretty well embedded. I think you were able to very quickly, even 4 months in, talk about the values without a problem. But what I wonder is, how are you measuring that? You talked a little bit about how you can specifically tie a behavior to collaboration and to candor. But again, creativity is a difficult one, not only to define, but to observe. How do you measure that sort of difference?
Well, again, we're we're doing it right now, right? So we have our values, and that's what all the focus groups and everything are, to define concretely the values. So I can talk a little bit about like where we're going. And again, having done this, in my former company, we actually went through this exercise probably 10 years ago where we had to first define the values, then define the behaviors, and then implement them, institute them in all the different HR processes, let's say. But again, this is where during the performance management, so when you're looking at the performance management, for example, this is how I'm thinking about it, and this is how we've done it in the past. Everybody has their objectives, right? But you have like the 5 values, and you're asking employees. And by the way, part of the objective should be really clarifying which of the values are critical either for that person's own individual development or for the job. And maybe it's both, or maybe there's some separation, right? The leader has to define that on an individual basis with each person. And then you can either give them an objective like, hey, I want you to focus on creativity. That's an area where I think you need to sort of open your mind, let's say, and be more curious or inquisitive in terms of how you approach your role and understand what other companies are doing, for example. And so you could either give them a target, or again, you can ask them to give you their objective. And I've seen it both ways. But then at the end of the year, when you're assessing against business objectives or leadership objectives, you're also assessing them and you're giving them real feedback. And that feedback can come from the leader, from the peers, from the subordinates, to understand how that person actually brought creativity to life. And so you have to also train managers and teams on how do you do that. So all of those things we're putting in place to support the ability to embed them. And that's why it takes real time in order to do it. But for sure, creativity for a very senior person, like for our creative director of fashion, she's creating every day. It's very easy for her to demonstrate how she's being creative. But we need also very junior designers that are also being creative. We need people in the e-commerce team and the marketing team, and frankly, like in HR, to also be creative. So I think, like, I would define it as, again, like being curious, being inquisitive, bringing different ideas, different points of view. You don't have to have all the answers. With AI and all the tools out there, it's actually easier than ever to get different ideas, solutions, to understand how other people are approaching certain topics. So it's definitely an ambiguous one, but I think that there are ways to actually demonstrate it. And it's usually pretty easy to demonstrate when people are not doing those things.
What's nice about the combination of this exercise of values and the fact that you joined 6 months ago is that it creates a very clear framework for everything else, right? You mentioned it, like you start with the values, you articulate them very clearly. You say, okay, this is what we care about, right? And then you have performance evaluation, you have leadership development, you have basically all the HR strategy that's connected, that's basically derived from your values. So the strategy is very clear for everyone. It's very clear why we're doing anything. So I'm curious, because you mentioned leadership development, how did your leadership development change, or how do you think it will change because of like this new exercise, relatively new exercise of really defining and refining the values?
Mm-hmm. Well, I would add, before I respond to that question, I would say the framework, I agree with you, is very important, and it also allows people to opt in or opt out. Like if those values don't resonate with you, you might be able to decide that's not the right organization and company for me. And by the way, that is totally okay. Like that's awesome. In fact, the way that we've thought about it in my past and the way that I'm thinking about it in the future is really starting with that. So if we're developing leaders, but really talent at any level, we need to make sure that any program that we're looking at incorporates these values. So if we're asking you to be candid, right? If candidness is something that we really want to cultivate in our culture, how do we help people through leadership development understand how to have candid, transparent, but impactful and helpful conversations? So that would be baked into any of the programs that we do. We would be baking in 360s. Which by the way, a lot of that is baked into tools. The issue is that not everybody is trained to understand really what do I do with that information. I go through a program, I have a 360. Now, how do I use that information to help me? So again, every program that we will develop has to be rooted in the values. We want to bring leaders in that understand how to cultivate creative teams. So we're going to build programs that give you skills to develop your creativity or the creativity within your teams. We're going to focus on leadership competencies that focus around collaboration. How do you engender collaboration in your team? So any of the programs, you'll have the other, of course, characteristics and competencies that you're trying to develop, but they all have to be rooted in the values. So I think what's kind of exciting about coming in and being able to relook at things new is that from the get-go, we can make sure that all of that stuff is already integrated into our programs and don't have to unwind things where maybe there was some inconsistency between the program and the values that we were espousing as an organization.
I love that you're thinking of it in such a holistic viewpoint of an ecosystem. It's not one solitary silo of HR. And not only are you, as the CHRO, thinking along different verticals, but you're also really imposing that into all the things that you're doing so that junior creative directors are also thinking about marketing and e-commerce and so forth. So that's a really great holistic plan. Are you using, because I know we always bring AI into the conversation, I know that you're really focused on this full roadmap for HR. How are you using AI in that space to make HR come along with the story of AI and imparting that into how you're running JCrew?
Well, I mean, right now it's very interesting because we have an amazing CIO, and that has been so incredible for me to come in and be able to have this partnership and collaboration. And I really feel strongly, I felt this way before, and now I see it in action. To really drive AI in an organization, you need this collaboration between technology and people. And I'll come back to your question in one moment. But right now, one of the things that we're focused on, she and I together, is driving AI adoption in the organization. We have some really interesting tools that we offer to our employees, things like Copilot, Claude, ChatGPT, of course, like most companies. But we need to create the mindset, the willingness for people to explore, to play around, to just again have the curiosity. And so one of the programs that we're doing now, we have an external partner, and a lot of their work around AI adoption has recognized that there really are three components to successful AI adoption. The first is the mindset. It starts with creating the right mindset. The second is recognizing that it's going to require new skills. And then the third, and they're not necessarily in this order, although maybe mindset would be the most important, but the other one is, of course, the tools. You could have all the best tools in the world, but if you don't have the mindset, the curiosity, or if you don't have people that understand how to use the tools in a different way than they've used old tools, then it doesn't really work. So we're kind of doing like the very foundational work right now, which is to say we just need to create the mindset. And for us, we need to understand more concretely what are those skills so that, for example, when we go back to learning and development, we can really start to make sure that we're building those skills. The skills that we have been building for the past, maybe are going to be very different because a lot of that is now going to be managed through AI. So where you might have been doing a lot of data collection and manual work, now you need to be able to, you're going to put that in a system, but you need to be able to know how do I assess the information that I'm getting. That's a different skill. That's much more around critical thinking skills. So I think that we're doing a lot of different like cohorts and learning sessions and playing around and dividing different cohorts and teams based on where they are in their AI journey. And our external partner is helping us find that through some employee surveys that we're doing. You could be at the very like basic level where you just use ChatGPT for planning your vacation. Or you could be somebody like we had one employee that built an entire new retail business model using Claude. It was incredible and very sophisticated, frankly, what he was able to come out with. So we're working on building the mindset. It's something that, by the way, is marketing. In my old company, we had put together an AI HI task force, really just focused on HR so that we could understand what were some of the roadblocks for employees wanting to use the tools we had. And it was fascinating to find that in some cases, there was fear. Some people were worried about the economic impact, and some people felt like they were cheating by using AI. So we realized we need to do some marketing around, hey, we want you using AI. This is great for you. It's great for us as an organization, and we're going to accompany you on the journey. So I don't know if I exactly answered your question, but for us, the mindset, really capturing the skills, we'll integrate that skill development as part of our learning and development strategy, and then partnering with our teams to understand what are the best business use cases where AI is really going to add value in HR, in finance and supply chain, whatever the function. We think there's a lot that we can do around talent management, for example. We know that we can use AI to help us better understand the talent we have in the organization, the talent gaps, the gaps that we need or what we need to build for the future, also learning and development, and then a recruitment, especially when you're looking at volume recruitment for retail sales, for example. There's a lot of areas where we know already that AI can be a game changer for us.
That's such a crucial element. And I want to kind of dig in as you were talking about the more advanced employee that was able to build out this full model in Claude. I think what is really crucial in this HR space and a lot of the conversations I'm having is that people do have a lot of fear that, oh, well, if Claude built this thing, like how could I still have a job? But I think the crucial element that you poked at right there was that he had the ability to judge the output in order for that help from Claude to possibly put it together faster, but he had the ability to judge it because of his own skill set. So those types of skills are what, from an L&D perspective, we're looking at to develop. So prompting, critical thinking, problem solving, and so forth. Have you encountered that in your role where you are using a co-pilot or a Claude or something of that nature, but then it certainly helps move it forward, but then because of your own experience in the world, you're able to then refine it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, even when I came into this role, I was, of course, getting a lot of data, a lot of insights from my colleagues, from, every employee, the interaction that I could get. And at one point we did sort of a 360 from HR, from business leaders, and we put all of this data sort of into one of our AI models. I think it might have been Copilot, and really just, put all this unstructured data to kind of give us back, like, what's the synthesis of this data in terms of what would you, based on everything, what do you believe are the key priorities that we should be focused on? What are we hearing from all of these leaders? And I would say that was like really incredible. And I had done my own sort of 90-day observation. There was a lot of consistency with what we heard and what we saw. And so then I was able to continue to use AI to help actually take all of this information and really help me frame up, like build the framework for my HR strategy. Now, to the point of myself and my colleague, there was a ton of work that went into this in putting the data, understanding the data. There was a ton of work that went in after I received. I mean, I didn't just receive a strategy from Claude and then go and present it to my CEO, right? It was really like then refining it and tweaking it. But the starting point was enormous. It allowed me to go so much faster to get to like a much better outcome. And I think, I mean, as good as I can be at analyzing data, there's no question that it was able to do it faster and better than I would have been able to do. And so those are just some like examples that we're using. And even my colleague, again, we have a great format, but now we're really taking it and we're refining it. We're having other functions look at it. We're like, critiquing it. So it's not like the job is done when you get that. Actually, in a way, the job starts now that you have that. Now, and is it accurate? Does it make sense? And now what do I do? How do I actually drive this through? So I find it, and there's some other areas where I've also used it. And that's, again, what we're just encouraging people is just experiment with it. You might be surprised at what you are able to get out of it just by putting in a few prompts and just testing things. And one of our trainings, we had a professor that really spoke to us about sort of what are the types of things to ask AI and where is it not going to actually give you the best results. So it's transforming my work, I will tell you, and really helping accelerate my onboarding into the company.
One thing that I saw a lot in companies, specifically Microsoft, for example, is that they're using heroes, basically. And heroes are relevant also for values. We started with that, right? Like you have values, so you have probably some heroes who embody, like you have your creativity, like someone who's extremely creative, extremely collaborating, and so on and so forth. And then you mentioned the story with Claude. So you have kind of like a hero, someone who basically went on and really did something that you would like all employees to experiment with. So do you leverage that? Like, how do you basically share the news, or like kind of like give heroes a spotlight so others can basically learn from them and kind of like living examples for behaviors that you would like to encourage?
Yeah. And by the way, that is another great way to demonstrate, I think, the value of creativity. And again, that's something where we would help employees say, going to Claude and working with them, that is not something that you should hide from your leader. That is awesome. We're super happy that you did that. Now, there always has to be the human. So don't just take it and again present it to somebody. Do the due diligence after, make sure that it makes sense. But the communication is really key. So just from an HR standpoint, I have an a monthly town hall with the entire HR team. All of our HR primarily are based in North America and Hong Kong. They always show up for the call, and we talk about different examples. We had one last week, and we had several of our teams that shared something that they've done, a project, and we had so many that we were able to share. So that was very exciting. Again, just to create some momentum and some buzz. Now our CIO has created a weekly newsletter where she's bringing external market information. She's bringing competitor information, how maybe somebody is using AI in a business setting. And then how are we thinking about that? Is that something that's interesting for J.Crew? And then she always highlights a best case or a use case that's happening within the J.Crew group. So again, that's part of us just trying to normalize the conversation around AI, I would say, and create some excitement and bring it to life for people in a way that shows them, oh, I didn't even think about using it for that. So we're doing it collectively. We're getting ready to now launch AI training for all of our employees. Our teams built it. Honestly, it's incredible what they were able to build. And we think this will continue to help us create the mindset and then show the use cases and just create some excitement around the potential of what it does. And I love the way that this professor described it to us. He's like, just think about it as it's a great college intern next to you that, is really smart, has learned a lot, but they still need a lot of direction and guidance. So it's not about taking your job. I think it's actually about making a better version of you, or making a better version of me. That's how I'm framing it in my mind.
I think that's such an important mindset to have. I know you went back to saying it's about mindset and skills and tools. And that's such a great shift in mindset of making it a better you as opposed to it being you. And I think that's where a lot of that fear comes from. And this is a huge change management initiative in any industry, but I think certainly within fashion, which is so rooted in creativity. And I can see the fear there too of, AI generated art and such. I can see where the fear would come in there. So how do you know that it's working? How are you going to measure that you're starting to see that AI fluency within your people?
Yeah, I think that's the thing that most companies are trying to sort of reckon with is, what does success look like? I think that some of it you'll get feedback from your employees and you'll be able to see the caliber of the work. And I think the work that our IT team is doing to really sit with businesses, build out programs, and then integrate those programs and then measure them over time. And you could measure them a lot of different ways. Could be reduced headcount in certain ways, and doesn't mean that headcount goes away. Maybe people are reallocated into new roles. It could be that there's actually a business impact, that there's some sort of ROI. It could be, again, it just cultivating more ideas and more creativity. I think it was like the Google CEO that was asked if he was going to be eliminating a bunch of engineers because of AI. And he said, no, I'm actually going to be hiring a lot more engineers because they can do a lot more work with AI. We could do a lot more creativity with AI. So again, how are we framing this up? And I've tried really to educate and learn, and I'm definitely on the learning journey. I would not want to presume that I'm like advanced on my journey, but in everything that I have learned and heard, everyone is trying to figure that out. How do you actually quantify how this is working or not? But on the other hand, we all know that this is happening. This is the reality. And what I'm saying to my teams and our teams is that we can sit back and let this happen to us, or we can really be a part of the journey and be a part of creating that future together, which I think is much more exciting, frankly, to do it like that.
Yeah, I heard a conversation that you had in a different recording where you were talking specifically about that of you can either have AI imposed on us, specifically in HR, or you can take the bull by the horns. And I really appreciate that. Again, going back to that mindset shift of it's happening. It has happened. I mean, we're in 2026. AI is in everything that we do and all of the things. So I just appreciate that shift.
And I always tell my team, sorry, I would just say, I'm always reminding them constantly, no matter where you are on the journey, it's perfect. It's perfect. If you're at the beginning of the journey, if you're in the, it's absolutely perfect because I don't want people to feel that they're behind or that it's too late for them. So I try to constantly reinforce the message that it doesn't matter. Just start.
I really appreciate that. So, moving into our big question that we ask everyone in this, if you could go back in time, talking about 2026, if you could go back and give your younger self one piece of advice, stepping into this senior HR leadership role that you now have for the first time, what would that be?
Well, it's interesting, and I'm going to answer it in a little bit of a different way. And it's sort of really, it's ironic because it very much corresponds to the conversation that we're having about AI. But I think that the one thing that I've really learned in my career, and the longer that I do this, the more I realize that at the end of the day, it's all about the people. It's about having the right people. It's about engaging them. It's about being very clear with what's expected and creating an environment and a culture where they know what success looks like. They're aligned against that success and those values, and they know that they're a part of building something really special. And probably I think I've always been a very people-oriented person, but I wish that I had really recognized the importance of that probably because, we all have these beautiful strategy decks, but none of those decks come to life on their own. They all come to life because of your people, your organization, and your team. And I feel like I see a lot of companies that miss that. They forget that fundamental piece. And even in a world of AI, I think it's more about the human skills. I think that's the interesting paradox is we need more of the humanity, more of the human skills. And I just see that again and again and again. It happens because you have the right people engaged, motivated, and they know what's expected of them. And they're excited to contribute to that.
I couldn't agree more. I think people tend to miss that HR stands for human resources. And when we lose the humanity, we lose a lot of the value that we can get because ROI comes from those people. So I appreciate the conversation that we've had today and just hearing how you do impart humanity into this world of AI and leading a global brand.
I think it was extremely insightful. And yeah, I love the focus, the clarity about what you're focused on, what you're trying to achieve, what comes with else. I think it makes everything much.
Thank you. Thank you. And I would just add, again, part of that humanity piece, it's also being honest and transparent with people when they're not performing, when they're not suited for the role. Like, for me, that's a part of it. It's not just touchy-feely beautiful, right? But it's having the courage. That's how you actually get to the right people, the right organization. So being an organization that has courage and conviction, I think is also really, really key. And I think that's also what people want. People want to know, right? So thank you. I mean, thank you for having me today. It's, these are topics that I'm really passionate about, and I always learn a lot on these during these conversations as well. So thank you so much for having me.